After more than 2 years of civil war, tens of thousands of people killed and millions more displaced, there is a transitional unity government in South Sudan. But can its two rivals stay united? And is Africa's newest country finally on its way to peace? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Folly Thibault. After more than 7 months of delay, South Sudan has finally sworn in its transitional unity government. President Salva Kiir and former rebel leader and now once again Vice President Riek Machar have agreed to share power, and each of them nominated members of the new cabinet. The 30 new ministers were sworn in on Friday, and Kiir used the opportunity to ask foreign leaders for economic help. But while Western leaders have praised South Sudan for this political milestone, they remain cautious, especially given the sensitive relationship between President Kiir and Vice President Machar. As you'll recall, it was a dispute between the two men that led to this conflict. Moving forward, President Kiir has emphasized the need for cooperation.
I assure you all that we are going to work together. The responsibility imposed on us by the agreement needs each and every one of us to contribute to the stabilization of our country. There is no blame that it was you who did this or who did that. If we do that, we will not move an inch.
Well, let's bring you up to date now on what led to the conflict and peace agreement in South Sudan. Africa's newest country gained independence in 2011 after years of conflict with Sudan. But nearly 2 years later, President Salva Kiir sacked his Vice President Riek Machar, accusing him of plotting a coup. And that dispute plunged the country into war. A ceasefire was signed the next month, but it was the first of many that failed to stop the fighting until last August, when Kiir and Machar finally agreed to a peace deal under the threat of UN sanctions. That's the deal that dictated how Friday's cabinet was chosen and brought back Machar to his previous post of vice president. As part of the agreement, the new transitional government will remain in power until October of 2018. Well, let's bring in now our guest for today's Inside Story. From Juba, we're joined by Ateny. He's the spokesman for President Salva Kiir. Also joining us from Juba is Dhieu Mathok. He's the Secretary General of Riek Machar's SPLM in opposition party and is the Minister for Energy and Dams in the new transitional government. And from Oxford, we're joined by Douglas Johnston. He's a scholar of South Sudan who has been an international participant in several of the country's previous peace negotiations. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on Inside Story. It's good to have you on the program. Mr. Ateny in Juba, if I may start with you. Some of the South Sudanese that we've been hearing from say that this new unity government is made up of the same people who led South Sudan into war, that nothing is going to be different. What do you respond?
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to disagree with those who say they are the same people and they will not be able to do anything good. They are not the same people. They are the same people in as much as their physical appearance is concerned, but they are now a changed man because, you know, peace agreement was signed because there is a necessity for the people of South Sudan to yearn, you know, for peace. And that the two leaders has recognized the fact that, you know, without peace in South Sudan, nothing can move forward. And you can see from their speech when the vice president was, the first vice president, Dr. Machar, was sworn in. He expressed the commitment to work with the President Salva Kiir and open a new page. And President Salva Kiir also, you know, echoed the same thing and said he will be actually working with Machar. The challenges which are actually, you know, lying ahead are the challenges of how to improve the security and how to improve the economic situation in the country.
Sure.
But the two men has willingly shown that they will be actually able to work to return the country to normalcy. So I see, you know, something different in the way they they will be actually working.
Something different, you say, Mr. Ateny. Mr. Mathok, also in Juba, your SPLM-IO faction has been given the key petroleum ministry in this transitional government, this unity government. But President Salva Kiir pretty much remains in control here. He dominates his cabinet. And, you know, to a lot of people, this feels a bit like deja vu. We've been here before where Vice President Machar was in power. But at the time, the first time around, he was only assigned limited responsibilities and authorities. Do you feel that it's going to be different this time around? Mr. Ateny says they're the same faces, but different men, different vision. Do you think it's going to be different this time?
I would like to agree with the Ateny work in his statement. You know, you are right. These are the same personalities, but the program is going to be very different, and this is important to be underlined. When war erupted, it was because the SPLM, as a ruling party, could not agree on the way forward after the independence. The reform agenda has come clearly now from the agreement. And I believe that if we implemented the agreement, there is going to be change. There is going to be change in the institutional setup. There is going to be change in the security sector. There is going to be change in the civil servants. So I believe that this new government, with the obvious faces, with the new program, is going to make a difference.
You think it's going to make a difference, but I think that what many South Sudanese are wondering today, and the key question is that will these leaders, who are the same as we've seen in the past, will they finally put the people's interests above their own interests?
That is why I said when we disagree, it was because of the program, of the direction that the country must have to take. Now we agreed in the peace agreement, we have a reforms agenda, which we are going to implement. So if this peace agreement is implemented, automatically there is going to be a difference.
Okay, Douglas Johnson in Oxford, do you agree with the two gentlemen? Does this new unity government represent a new beginning for South Sudan, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's too early to say. I'm hoping that the two gentlemen are correct, but all of the people in the transitional government have a track record. It's known. Some of it is good, some of it is not. I think that it's a very big mistake to focus on Juba and think that peace can be made there only, because the country has been devastated by the fighting that's been going on. There are people outside of this peace agreement who still have armed men, armed groups who have refused to be part of the peace agreement. It's going to take more than sitting around the table and handing out ministries in Juba to bring the country back together.
What about the differences, Douglas Johnson, between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar? Have those been patched up? Because there's been a great deal of mistrust between these two men for a long, long time. I mean, will they overcome these differences, you think?
Well, I hope so. I can't say from sitting in Oxford whether it's been patched up. There has been a long history within the SPLM and in South Sudan of former enemies and former opponents getting together and finally working together. So I hope that that can be repeated. But we're just going to have to wait and see the results, whether they really get down to understanding what needs to be done to reconstruct the country, to reconcile the population, to bring in new policies. We have to wait and see what they do.
Well, the challenges awaiting this new government are enormous. The new cabinet has about 30 months to try and stabilize South Sudan. That includes ensuring rival armed groups in Juba put down their weapons. And as we mentioned earlier, tens of thousands of people have been killed, with both sides accused of war crimes. More than 2 million people have been displaced and need to be resettled. Much of the oil infrastructure is damaged, which is one of several reasons why the economy of South Sudan is weak. Then there is the issue of the number number of states, which President Salva Kiir wants to almost triple, a plan critics say unfairly benefits his Dinka ethnic group. The new government also needs to agree on a permanent constitution within the next year and a half. Mr. Ateny in Juba, so a lot of challenges lie ahead, and one of the biggest ones right now is to ensure that all guns are silent and remain silent. And despite the formation of this new government, as Mr. Douglas Johnson in Oxford pointed out, there are still some groups that are fighting, groups that are not affiliated with either President Machar or President Salva Kiir or Vice President Machar. So how exactly does the government plan on reining in these groups?
Thank you once again. In actual fact, there are going to be some challenges. The road is going to be a little bit bumpy, but still the commitment that was shown by the two leaders, President Salva Kiir Mayardit, who is the President of the Republic of South Sudan, and Dr. Riek Machar, who is the first Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan. Though the two men represent two difficult organizations that were locked up in a very difficult fight, they have shown their commitment to ensure that they return the country to normalcy. Returning country to normalcy, they put on their agenda the security issue as the first thing. Of course, there are some rebels which are still fighting, who are not affiliated to the SPLM or to government. They are still fighting. And this will come down to the group that the IGAD ignored during the time when peace agreement was under negotiation in Addis Ababa, and prior to the signing of the peace agreement in August 17 and 26, respectively. Now, looking at this, you would find that the country still have a difficulty to put the economics situation in a better form, and still there are those who are still scattered and would want to fight the government of national unity.
Yeah, but my question is, sorry to interrupt you, sir. I want to ask you. You say
important aspect is the fact that the two.
I apologize. Apologies for interrupting you. You say that there are these groups. My question specifically is, what is the government going to do to rein in these groups, to make sure that they are included in the peace process?
Well, President Salva Kiir made it categorically clear that all the other factions who are not part of the SPLM-IO should come home. And I'll give you one example. The faction of General Gadkot, signed with us the peace agreement in Nairobi, and memorandum of understanding. And also we have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Arrow Boys in Western Equatoria. That was signed by the presidential advisor, Tut Galwak. And all this was in an attempt to make this country, coming to normalcy, because we saw it quite important to ensure that our people live in a peaceful country.
Right.
And that's why we actually extended the olive branch to anyone who have taken up arms to fight the government. So this is the priority of the government.
Okay.
And even Dr. Machar himself, clearly stated that they have to work with President Salva Kiir in order to ensure that the country has a better security situation.
Douglas Johnson, for our international audience, again, there are many groups operating here, many groups involved. Why were these groups not included, the ones that are fighting, still fighting today, why were they not included in the negotiations for peace?
Well, some of them broke away from SPLM-IO because they were not supporting the idea that there should just be a reconciliation between the former vice president and the president. Some of the groups are fighting to overthrow and remove the president. That is their goal. And therefore, reconciliation between the two principal political players doesn't satisfy that. Others have been working entirely for their own security and have been trying to arrange their own security in the face of fighting or assault from one group or another. Some of them don't really have a political agenda. So it's very difficult to put them into the IGAD process. And that, I think, is not the point. That the IGAD process is to put a government in Juba that will address these problems. And it is the government in Juba that now has to address these problems and approach these different groups to see how some sort of truce can be established and some sort of reconciliation and some way in which the country can then start rebuilding itself.
Mr. Mathok, in Juba, is Vice President Machar confident that, peace can be achieved with these groups, that they can be brought in, that can be reined in? Groups like, Peter Gadet's faction, which broke away from Vice President Machar's faction, they've not laid down their weapons. So how much, leverage does the Vice President has on these groups today?
Actually, I want to disagree with the two gentlemen on this issue of security. And I believe that the agreement has not been put into test. The provisions of the security arrangements are not being operational. We believe that if the ceasefire arrangement is conducted in a manner which is now prescribed in the agreement, this war will come to the stop. We would like our leaders, President Salva and Dr. Machar, since he's around now in Juba, to sit and agree on the cantonment sites of the troops of the SPLM-IO in the Bahr el-Ghazal and Equatoria. And this is the area which now there is a lot of confrontations. We believe that war is going to stop if these provisions are implemented. Concerning the other individuals who actually move away from the SPLM-IO, I believe that Peter Gadet and his group, they were individuals. They don't command troops, and we have not heard of battles that they fought now in South Sudan, whether in Upper Nile or in Bahr el-Ghazal or in Equatoria. I don't think that they have a lot of difficulties in security arrangement which is now taking place.
But
we just want
are you confident, Mr. Mathok? Are you confident
to agree on the cantonment size of the?
Right. On that precisely, I do want, because this was one of the issues that prevented Mr. Riek Machar from returning for a long time to Juba. Are you confident today that these security arrangements will be respected by the other side?
If we don't implement the security arrangement, we will not have peace. Peace to us and to the ordinary citizen is about of the gun be silent. If guns are not going to be silent, then we will not have peace in our country.
Okay.
We hope that the arrival of Dr. Machar will necessitate the agreement on the security arrangement provisions and the cantonment sites in the two regions of Bahr el-Ghazal and Equatoria. The war now is there because the government is denying the SPLM-IO forces to go for the assembly points in those areas.
Okay. Another key issue, Mr. Ateny, in Juba is the question of accountability. Thousands of people have been killed in the last 2 years. 2 million people forced to flee from their homes. And a recent report by the United Nations and Amnesty International said that state actors bear the most responsibility for the crimes, even though both sides have been accused of abuses. So the question is today, have there been investigations into these abuses? Has the government put those responsible? Has there been justice, basically? Are they being held accountable for these abuses?
Yes, these are part of what the two leaders has actually said during the swearing-in ceremony, that they would be working to ensure that they negotiate on those funding issue, because these are funding issues that will be discussed by the two parties. Now, even when I was seeing my brother, Dhieu Mathok, was talking about the government now is actually including the SPLM SPLAIO.
Yeah, but this is
And
not
so
going
when,
to be enough, though. I mean, people are not going to be
SPLM,
appeased.
SPLAIO
Sorry to
inside the
interrupt you.
government.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It's not going to be enough, though. People are not going to be appeased by
Yeah.
just having the opposition in Juba today. They have to be responsibility and accountability for the crimes that have been committed in the last 2 years.
Yes, yes, I'm telling you, both sides, before they come to sign peace agreement and before they come to now join the government of national unity, both sides were said to have committed, some individual within those organizations might have come out and committed atrocities in which the two leaders actually are responsible to ensure that those responsible are actually brought to book. So the government side is committed, that's the government of President Salva Kiir, is committed to ensure that when there are, individuals found to have committed a crime against humanity, they would be brought to book. And also, Dr. Machar should also do the same. As now one government, we have to ensure that accountability is one of the fundamental issues that the government of national unity should sit on top of it.
Douglas Johnson.
They have to move to a reconciliation, and reconciliation cannot happen before the accountability.
Okay, Douglas Johnson, do you think accountability can happen today in South Sudan? Or is the fragile nature of the peace in the country and the desire for peace to be maintained simply going to, surpass this? I mean, can there be accountability when peace itself is so fragile and the people in charge today are the people being blamed for the abuses that have been committed in the last 2 years?
Well, I think this is one of the lessons of the interim period of the end of the comprehensive peace agreement that ended the war between Khartoum and the SPLM. There was no attempt at accountability during that period. There was no attempt at reconciliation between communities that had been fighting each other within South Sudan. There was no attempt at accountability for any of the crimes or atrocities that either of the factions of the SPLA had committed during the war. And this is one of the reasons why the explosion of violence has been so terrible since 2013, and even in the state of Jonglei, when there was fighting between the Nuer and the Murle, atrocities were committed there that went way beyond the sorts of atrocities that people had suffered during the war. So it's not enough to say that there can be no accountability because the peace is too fragile. People will want justice.
Right.
They will want accountability. It will be up to South Sudanese to decide how that is done rather than imposed on them. But there are possibilities. There are truth and reconciliation commissions, perhaps, hybrid courts, transitional justice of some sort that works from the ground up as well as from the top down to get accountability and some sort of reconciliation begun.
Finally, Douglas, just one last question for you. What role for the international community here? Are we going to see financial relief? Because the economy is another key issue here. Are we going to see financial relief from the international community now that this transitional unity government is in place?
Well, I think the international community is going to be very cautious about what resources they put in. The problem with the economy of South Sudan was created by South Sudanese and by the government. It is their responsibility to put that right. The international community, the taxpayers of the UK, the US, Norway, etc., are not going to want to pay the salaries of soldiers or ministers or their hotel bills or pay for the transportation of more weapons into South Sudan. It is more likely that the financial support will go into specific projects, perhaps projects supporting justice, perhaps projects supporting resettlement and rehabilitation of displaced persons and the reconstruction of the infrastructure. But I think that the international community is going to be watching very carefully how this government behaves and where it puts its resources before committing their resources to the process of peace.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for an interesting and informative discussion. Thank you, Ateny, Ateny, Dhieu, Mathok, and Douglas Johnson. Thank you all for being on Inside Story. And thank you as well for watching. You can always watch this program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Folly, Thibault, and the whole team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.